near-death experience was like a kicking back into gear of like a reset and allowing myself, because the basic message was I was not fulfilling what I promised and what I came here to do. I was subliving, that I was just going along with society, that we have these very set specific ways, and the marriage, the kids, the jobs, and then it's the humdrum, and that's the trapping of the souls of this reality.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and Sifu Taoist Master Sun Ching, and I have a amazing, incredible being here today that I really resonated with. Just sampling the frequency that she is transmitting in this reality. Maria Lupita Gurule.
Very good. Maria Lupita Gurule. Yes.
Welcome, friend. I'm very grateful to have you here.
As am
And
I. Truly, truly. Thank you so much.
you have such an interesting backstory and sort of like your evolution to where you are today and what you're offering to pretty much the world, the universe, and how you're able to transmit that into this 3D reality. I would love you to just share with the audience a little bit of your backstory and how you got to where you are today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Truly. There's a term that is coined on the planet at this time, that a multitude of us on the planet are star beings. And this I am very aware of. I have a very interesting early experience within my life that kind of predisposed me to this. We truly do choose our family, our origin, our experiences, and here to serve. So my whole life, first of all, my name is Maria Lupita, which is a nickname. I'm actually Maria Guadalupe. And I am named after Our Lady, the Virgin Mary of Our Lady of Guadalupe out of Mexico.
Yes, that was that when you said that, I was like, wow.
My mom had a really difficult pregnancy, which is really interesting because it kind of sets the tone for my entire existence. So I'll share a story in a moment of where I had a near-death experience, but my own birth was extraordinarily difficult. I was 3 weeks late in review of my interlife and prior to my natal experience. I did not want to be born. I knew that this experience was going to be pretty difficult and tough. And so my mom actually prayed to our Blessed Mother, Our Lady of Guadalupe, and promised that if I was born healthy and safe, that she would name me after her. And so really early on as a child, my father was going to university at Highlands University here in New Mexico, part of the United States. And he was studying bilingual education. And so part of his internship was to be in Mexico. And so my older brother, myself, my mom, and my father were there for about 6 months. And while we were there, I got to see the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe. But more so than that, Teotihuacan, which is the pyramids located just about, half hour, 30 minutes outside of Mexico City. My mom recounts this story that as I was a child, but maybe 4 years old, where I was running through and saying, Mira, mama, ahí está el templo del sol. Like, look, mom, there's the temple of the sun. As though I had a recollection and a memory of already being there. And that had been my early exposure into this life. And I had an experience in Acapulco, which while we were there in this internship with my father, of undergoing water. And at the time, there was a lot of play, a lot of people around, a lot of commotion. So all I know is that for a moment there, I felt all of this gold all around me. And I remember what I call my Lady of Gold. And I had this overwhelming feeling of like excitement and her kind of just saying, well, it's not time yet. But I never really made sense of that experience until way, way, way later. So fast forward, I'm but 27 years old. I've already had a really difficult pregnancy and birth of my first child, where he and I we each almost lost each other. He had to be resuscitated at the moment he was born. He was born 10 weeks early. I had preeclampsia and toxemia. And then I had a lot of opening experiences. I had probably my first out of need experience of energy healing out of the need for my child. He was in an incubator and I couldn't hold him or touch him or caress him. And so I wanted him to feel the warmth of my hands. And so I rubbed my hands and I laid my hands over him so that he could feel the warmth of my hands. And spontaneously, I could see the inner anatomy in my mind's eye. And I could see what looked like this laser light going across his lungs that was sending this energy and this healing into his body. And it was beaming from like the palms of my hands, and to be able to see his physiology and then how that spontaneously happened. So after that first initial experience, it was like an awakening, an opening into there's something happening with me, something that I've been suppressing. And I was like, nope, I'm going to, go with society. I'm going to have the two kids, the job, the house, the family. And I was like, I'm not going to be messing with this other stuff. I don't know what this is. But out of need for my child, it opened up something and it reawakened this really deep connection and faith within me that I felt as a child. So then 2.5 years later, during the birth of my second child, and this was in June 5th, 2000, I died. And not because of the birth of her, not during her birth, but it was a surgery that I had afterwards. So because I had such extreme pregnancies, she was also induced. I had an extraordinary experience with her birth. It was, other than it being induced, it was the exact opposite of my son, where he was in chaos and turmoil and life and death and all of these other resuscitation, and hers was very calm. And because I had such difficult pregnancies and I was already admitted into the hospital, I had made the decision with my gynecologist that my body could not endure another pregnancy. It was one of the most excruciating and difficult experiences. So I received an epidural for my daughter's birth, which is just outside of the dural sac. So it was just enough to, kind of subdue the pain during the childbirth. Well, they kept the catheter in my back, and during that preparation for the surgery, the anesthesiologist, inserted, and this time it is a spinal block, which means that they enter into the dermis and they give the anesthesia directly into the spine. And I signed all the waivers and all the papers, and my heart stopped and my lungs stopped. And this experience in the birthing room, because the birthing room and the recovery room is the same in the hospital that I was in. But the experience is I saw my mom holding my daughter, and I remembered distinctly saying, she's going to be fine. And from there, I had this blacking out kind of experience. And the last thing I remember is the anesthesiologist asking me, and at the time, my married name, Martinez, Miss Martinez, are you okay? And that's the last thing I remember. Then en route to the operating room, which is different than the floor of where the birthing facility is in the hospital. So it was, it was actually on another floor, but down the hall. And we had to get down the hall to an elevator to get to the operating room. And en route there, they had to resuscitate me and intubate me. And I was out for approximately 8 minutes. So I had a full near-death experience. And while I was on the other side, the very first image and impression that I had was of the Blessed Mother. And she was larger than life. It looked as though I was microscopic looking at an entire sun. It was massive in size. And before I saw that, it wasn't like a tunnel. I didn't seem to travel anywhere, although it had this feeling of movement. It was more so that like this pinpoint of white that all of a sudden just started to consume the room. And it was that white that I began to see this translucent, transparent image of her. But it was more that I saw these entwined hearts. And it was as though there were these two fires that were intertwined together. and this piercing white that was directly through it. Well, that was the first experience I had, was with her. And then through it, I understood that this entwined fires were these two entwined hearts. It's like the sacred heart, but also the immaculate heart, both together. And because of my upbringing, was Spanish Catholic, and given my name and our devotions, that was something that I knew and somewhat already expected in my culture, my heritage, my experience. I had a full experience on the other side, that although I had this first initial connection and I saw them, and even through her, I saw these entwined hearts and what I know to be, this masculine image, this figure, and that looked as though a gentleman cloaked in white. And I knew that energy to be that Christ consciousness. And from that experience, that I didn't want to go back, but I knew that I didn't belong there either. And I was given an opportunity to be what I call worked with. That during that time, I had an entire experience on the other side, working with my higher self, working with guides, working with what I call a council, to be able to help prepare me for my return. My body was viable. I just did not want to endure life. I was going through one of the most difficult experiences, and I did not think that I could survive that experience. And so I was given an opportunity to see the bigger picture of what we are, that we are so much more powerful than we could ever possibly imagine. That what is happening on the earth right now is something that is, I want to be here. Every single one of us want to be here for this coming of this golden age. And what I saw is that, oh my God, that I was working actively with myself in preparation of my return. So I had a life review. I had an ability to see and sense and feel the experiences of others, to gain this knowledge and wisdom, to learn how to apply it while I was here, to kind of prepare me for the return. And the very last thing with this experience is that this all transitioned, and I had about, four very distinct, experiences or phases. One where I couldn't reconcile what was happening, and there was like this cleansing bath and this healing temple. Another experience of where working with snippets in my life and preparation of, being able to manage that, basically a review of my soul's contract and learning how to remember and to implant these moments of what we think is deja vu, or we think that these are like messengers or guidance. They're actually also signals along our path and journey from ourself, to give us like, okay, we're headed in the right direction. So I hope I'm not getting too far out there, because I've learned over these last, we're now 2024. This happened in June 5th, 2000. So we're coming up on 24 years. So I've learned how to work with it, how to apply it, how to go back in meditation, how we are literally straddled in both places, that we have access to greater, bigger part of ourself, that we have guides and benevolent light beings, and whether we call those angels or whatever our belief may be, that there is so much more to what we understand and what we realize and know to be. So in this, that was the understanding, the working with while I was there. And one of the last, all of this counsel, that I was taken to this most magnificent field. And it looked like atop a hill, and I could see these massive rolling hills for as far as the eye could see. And it looked like the birth of a new system. I could see these galaxies and stars and these lights and colors. And I'm standing on this hillside with these, 3/4 other beings, and being shown this field of flowers, and this field of flowers that was of every possible color, and colors that we could not even imagine into our human eye. These most incredible energies. And I knew instinctively, without being told, that every flower represented a soul. and that we were all part of this soul group, and that somehow I was meant to touch and impact all of these souls, and I couldn't comprehend how. How is this even possible? And I would see this most incredible like wave, as though there was like this most gentle breeze, and all of the flowers would move together simultaneously. And what we would see like in a school of fish, or particular bird groups where they all kind of fly together. There's a name for that that escapes me, but we are the same. And I had this deep sense of love and understanding that what is happening here on the planet, I want to be part of. That this is something so incredible that is happening, that there are souls that are awaiting to arrive here. That so many of us have been here over multiple incarnations, putting into this prolonged period of time, that we perceive here to be prolonged and linear. But there, it's all happening simultaneous. They were here to bring in and usher in this golden age. I knew that there was something special happening on the planet, and I could not wait to get back. And so, with that own decision, being able to relieve a lot of the imprints, the programs, the problems, the hassles, the pain that I experienced as a human soul. So, I was able to be brought back to where I was originally, in the presence of the Blessed Mother. Only this time she was holding an infant, and beside her was my mother. Now, they're both alive. They're here on earth, and so people may say like, well, how on the other side? Well, we're all straddled there. The greater part of ourself is already and still safely there. That only a part of our awareness and our consciousness is in these human bodies. And I've come to understand that. So, in seeing the Blessed Mother hold my child, I knew it to be my daughter. And it was this most divine, sacred, feminine energy from the universal energy of the divine feminine of creation, holding my daughter to my mother, to me. And so she gave her a kiss, handed her to my mother. My mother held her, and with that awareness of, oh my God, I had a child. I can't leave her motherless on the day that she's born. And it was this frantic energy. It wasn't like this peaceful, like in this beautiful return. It was intense. It was excruciating. It was a panic. And it felt like I had run and jumped and taken a leap off of like a 10-story building and crash landed smack into my body, and felt all the pain of it. I was still intubated at the time. And so I couldn't move. I couldn't move my body. I couldn't speak, of course. And I was gagging because of the intubation. And I felt someone cradle my head and whisper into my ear, it's going to be okay. And at the time, I didn't know what it was, but it was the most loving energy, the most loving presence that I thought at the time was like this angelic being. And with that, just a single tear just able to drip down my eye. And then that's when they removed the intubation tube. They stabilized me. They continued with the surgery. And then I had 3 years of suffering, of thinking, why did I come back? It's not what I thought it was going to be. So I'm going to pause there for a moment and just allow, because I've been talking quite a bit, and just thank you for allowing me to share that story. And so it's one of that was
Well,
life altering.
yeah, I mean, that's really profound. Realizing the sort of like depths of awareness that comes with what you're speaking of. And so right down to, your initial sort of clear sense of being able to validate this connection that you had with the energetics, having seen this energy move through your son's body, realizing these deeper levels of understanding, this basic fundamental universal language that comes with that sensory, what I coin as sensory perception. I tend to put, psychic, medium, healer, channeler. I'm not dismissing any of these things, but they're degrees of sensory perception. And the second you acquire them, they're available to everyone. There's not an
Absolutely.
exception. not an exception to the rule. The only difference is it's just like, how do you perceive reality? It's like, that's the only limiting, you are the only limiting starting point of your realization. And that's what I've come to realize over the last 30 years I've been doing this. It just doesn't. And I mean, you've been in the same natural born sort of like cycle of things of understanding. And, it really is. There's not one right or wrong way up the mountain. So, you're just as you're describing things, you're also validating what I'm seeing when I see your aura emanate before me. And I'm seeing all these golden flames sort of like framed around your aura. And it's like an emission of white light. But at first I saw JC, but then it became even brighter than that. It wasn't so much of just a physical form as opposed to this incredible frequency that was generated that is just emitted white light. Normally, most people that I come across that are immersed into that representation or how they perceive God or Jesus, it comes out in the form that they see God or Jesus in. Whereas it was only for a split second, then it transmuted into a higher frequency. And then, of course, you're seeing the inner like weaving of these sort of like, they almost look like thorns from roses, and these two hearts are moving to it's really crazy stuff, man. Mm-hmm. But I just look in and observe. I don't get attached to the information, and that's why it's very easy for me to just sort of access it. I'm just seeing it. I'm like, holy moly. And the juice that you and I are sharing right now, that chill, that charge that we got up our spines, it's like, whoa, okay. This is the connection that we speak of. This is what Maria and I are talking about. It's like this understanding, this greater understanding of this internal realization. And so, for you had a near-death experience what could possibly be a catalyst for how you've ended up where you are today. I would say possibly looking and regressing over it. I did have a near-death experience when I was a child. I got hit by a car head on, and it's funny when you regress. And then, of course, my early 20s, I became a priest and walked that path and started on all those type of inner workings. And then it was sort of like, whoa, there's so much more to this. And so, for example, channeling, that's an incredible gift that you share with people. I channel too. I started channeling about 30 years ago, and it was sort of like an instant thing. Okay, it wasn't a stumbling across it. It was more like I had a teacher. The first time he showed me how to do it, Lao-Tzu appeared. That was it. So he's the master. He's basically the guy who transcribed the Tao Te Ching within Taoism. So if anyone goes, oh, it's the 81 verses of the Tao Te Ching, this is the guy that did it. And he kind of guides me along and teaches me. And then I access higher states of consciousness that are representative of just a perception. So, I have like over 170 teachers that I access for information, frequency, but they are just facets of consciousness. And guess what? Everyone has facets of consciousness. So it's like, I always remind people, if you dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own. And so this incredible experience that Maria's having, that I'm having, that we're sharing, that we're embodying that and transmitting it to the present moment, the now, which is really where you affect change. In my opinion, from my experience, that's how it happens. If you want to see magic, miracle, manifestation, it's now.
Yes.
It happens this moment. And it's sort of like the detachment of like a specific like narrative, like an emotion, is where you start to get down to the nitty gritty of being able to realize these miracles that people speak of that happen right now.
Exactly.
And I know that you have many of these examples within your journey in your natural born life. I would love you to share with the audience just a few that we could sort of get excited about.
Oh, absolutely. And that is what I came to understand first and foremost after my return, is that like there had a disconnect. I couldn't return back to where I was, and I couldn't reconcile where I was and where I'm going. And so it was a first early on struggle, and I did stumble across mine. And so even though I had these initial experiences, what I came to understand is that that near death experience was like a kicking back into gear of like a reset and allowing myself, because the basic message was I was not fulfilling what I promised and what I came here to do. I was subliving, that I was just going along with society, that we have these very set specific ways, and the marriage, the kids, the jobs, and then it's a humdrum, and that's the trapping of the souls of this reality. And so I stumbled across a lot of it because it began with me of knowing and sensing and feeling things that I shouldn't know about people. And it happened spontaneously in groups, and and my ears would ring and my stomach would turn, and I'd start having these images, and I finally started having courage of being able to say, sometimes this thing happens to me. Can I just share this with you? And
I,
yeah.
I love it because this is exactly what I'm talking about. It happened to me in the beginning of my journey. The clair senses, they turn on, and all of a sudden, I don't know about Maria, she's about to share it, but it turns into like a computer screen full of information, like icons everywhere. Anywhere you put your eyes, you can access information, and it's instantaneous. It's not like, oh, let me see if I can call my guides in. No, it's right there. So all of a sudden, you have the spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical summary of what's in front of you, and you could access that and like instantly share it. And
Mhm.
so you're touching my heart when you go, oh, I'm having these things and I wanted to ask someone, is it okay if I share it? And I've got to be honest with you, I don't know what your journey is like, but every time I do a psychic reading on someone, first they go, sure, go, yeah, go ahead. And then when I'm able to reveal their mental, emotional, and physical state inside of 3 seconds, and I've never met them before, they go, I made a very big mistake.
Mhm.
And it's like you all bets are off. So
Mhm.
you had this discovery. You're being very, very diplomatic about your entry into it. I can't wait to hear how
Mhm.
it works out.
It changed everything. When the very, very first time that it happened was with an absolute stranger. And so when he's like, "Oh yeah, this is what is making sense." I saw, then he had told me that he had wanted to connect with his loved one. It happened to be his partner that I was sensing and feeling. So my first sense of what was happening to me was what is now mediumship. I have struggled for the last 23 years to identify a title for myself, because it started with mediumship. Through mediumship, it turned into psychic ability, knowing things that I should not know. I would tell people things and they'd be like, "You're crazy, lady," only to hear back from them 6 months to 5 years later saying that thing you told me hadn't happened yet. So that, and all of a sudden I started to, so an example would be like sensing and feeling this woman that I was connecting with happened to be with her animal. So animal communication as well. So she wanted to connect with it. And I described how this poor dog had passed away. And she said, "That's not my dog. That's not how it happened." Only to hear 5 years later that she said, "I need to speak with you because what you told me back then 5 years ago, the dog had not even been born yet. The dog was only 3 years old. And the way that I described the dog and the way that the dog passed is exactly identically how I described it 5 years before." But I did not know. I thought in my mind I got that wrong. And so I've now trusted it so implicitly, where I tell people, if it doesn't make sense, hold on to it. If you have courage to share it with other people. There are times when where I've learned to just call it soul reading, that I meet people exactly where they're at. So as I wanted to develop tools to be able to help people, because I began to do this not ever intentionally. I had a full-time job. I was raising 2 kids. I had a husband. I had a life. I went like, what is all of this business? And so when I started having courage reaching out to people, and people that I worked with, they started telling their family and their friends, and people were starting to call me and say, "You work with so and so, or you talked with so and so. Can I talk to you?" And thinking like, how is this possible from the distance by telephone? And understanding, oh, wow. So out of all of this, we are infused in what I call the conscious net, that every single one of us are infused within, just similarly like the World Wide Web. We are all one. We are infused into this inter and intra connection, that we can sense and feel, that we have mirror neurons within each other that can feel and sense each other from the distance, that we have telepathy when we're thinking of our loved ones and all of a sudden they call, all of these things and experiences we have that we, subdue and think, oh, that was a weird coincidence. Huh? It's just that those parts of ourselves have been turned off. All of that junk DNA, all of the activations that are currently happening. So this brings us up into present time, is that, we are becoming alive, that we are those star seeds that are fully awakened. We have a star path, that there are very specific roles in infantries, what I call soul infantries, that there are very specific classes of soul spread upon the planet that are all working together, siloed, and that are now connecting with one another. So I set the intention that when I have these interviews, and I've done this, I found this out spontaneously, that I set the intention is that may myself and my voice and whatever needs to be said in the moment, that I give permission for that to occur. Well, little did I know that there's literally an energy transmission, that so many people would say, I don't know why, but when I heard your voice, I don't know why, but when I saw or heard you, that there's something that is actively happening in this living transmission, regardless of the time or when they hear it. So there's something that is active and it is divinely intelligent, and that we are part of it. Every single one of us has this ability. We all have the ability to sense and feel and connect and know. Those are the parts of us that have been turned off on purpose, by design, so that we would never fully fulfill that which we are. We have a God spark. We have nothing less than a starlight inside of us, that it emits a power that it powers universes. And how is that energy in that we hold being utilized? Where do we allow our energy and our mind and our thoughts to be? So much of us are suffering on this planet because of that. But if we understood the power that we are, what we have inside and what we have access to, the capability inside of us is that we are the ones that are creating that new earth. We're the ones creating it. It's not happening from the outside. That's why we are here. We chose to incarnate in these difficult experiences. The brightest of souls incarnate in the darkest of places to break up these systems. We actually trained, as missions on the other side, as souls to be here. That there are universes and souls throughout the entire universe that are wanting to be here at this time. A waiting list, that this is the most difficult, the most dense, but the most brightest of souls, the ones that have truly prepared for this, that we're making this change if we can allow ourselves to get out of the mundane, the trappings of all of those hooks to limit ourselves, that we could understand the power that we are and make a whole new earth. Wow.
Oh, I mean, amen to that. I just get so excited because the universe just puts me in the right place at the right time to bond and reconnect with incredible beings like yourself. It's just like a refreshing reminder of past experiences that you and I have had in past lives. It's just like, hey, welcome back. Welcome back. And you get to this point where you start to understand that you speak on specific types of depth of understanding that is being very clear recently. Channeling for the last 30 years of my natural born life, I've got to be honest with you. Normally, over the years, I've seen probably hundreds, thousands, probably between 1,000 and 2,000 different spirit entities. If I had to start counting them, let me get a number. It's kind of crazy. But to be very clear to the audience, in the last 6 or 8 weeks, before 6 or 8 weeks ago, I maybe would have come across an alien in its form
maybe twice in the last 30 years. And now in the last 6 or 8 weeks, I've come across dozens of aliens. Very apparent, very clear in people's auric fields. You know, it's like interesting because it intertwines, and Maria can speak on this, but when you look at someone's aura, it's like a snapshot of reality. It's as if you got blood work and that's for that moment. And it transmutes and transforms from a second to second basis. But, you know, and seeing all those energies within your field, I'm also seeing something very reminiscent of something that looks like a blue, tall, long, elongated being in your field, which is really interesting. Very strange. But I don't tend to go deep into it. I'm kind of one of those guys that like, here's the information right there. What do you want to do with it? And then people are like, oh my goodness, how did you see that? What happened? It's just information. And it's sort of like, I can go deeper, but I learned like 30 years ago when my clairsenses came on, I honestly had what they would define as a dark night of the soul for like 5 days, where I experienced every thought, every feeling, every emotion at once for 5 days straight. And so that to me was, and my teachers, Latsu, the three pure ones are the highest ascension before just transmutation of light within this state. So the three pure ones are the keepers of the cosmos. So they're like the beginning, the middle, and the evolution and creation of the cosmos, and that's what they represent. Supreme purity, highest purity, jade purity, and they're the keepers of light, information, and energy. And, you know, another transmutation of my perception of all things that are my reality. And this is something that's so important for people. It comes in all forms. There is no right or wrong way up the mountain. So within Taoism, we look at it like this. There's two sides of the mountain. One's yin, one's yang. Your journey as a Taoist is you're going up the mountain, merging the two together, becoming realized as one of all things. And then that's kind of like where we lean on the Tao is the mother of all things. And then people are like, well, hang on a second. But is the Tao, what does that mean? Is the Tao like God? And I said, well, kind of. The Tao is the Tao. God is God. There is not, you always need to be mindful of the frequency, the individual frequency and sequence of everything. Nothing is the same. When people sort of clump God, Jesus, Christ energy, whatever, and then, oh yeah, that's like the Tao, and it's like Allah, and no. I want people to understand the value of each expression, and it's all relevant to that individual at that moment. And so there's no exceptions to the rule. And the old expression we went back to, if you dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own. And so there it's like, okay, all right, I got you. And so, you know, you start to feel this incredible connection in that present moment, like the things that you're speaking of, the aliens, it's like, my goodness, you know, it's kind of getting to a point where it's really raising to a level that is undeniable. I'm not that I ever dismissed it, but it's like I used to, part of my job as a Taoist priest, don't know how that's happening, don't know what's going on. This always seems to happen. But as a Taoist priest, one of the techniques that we're taught is to perform exorcisms. And so, okay, great. This is part of religious and faith-based mystical internal alchemy that goes across all platforms. I'm just more forthcoming with saying this is one of the rituals and techniques that I'm taught, and I do it very easily. The first time I showed my mother that back in 25 years ago, she freaked out because it took place before her very eyes, and she went, "This is real." Yes, it's very real, but it's also a simulation of the individual. This is what I really need to stress to the audience. It's like when Maria and I come across these entities and we're channeling entities, whatever we experience from someone else's field is whatever they're creating within their own reality. This is a transmutation of that. It's a lens that's so important, and people need to understand that. So, you know, I've only ever come across a need for exorcisms when I normally get involved with someone that's living this fantasy that they need to find this lower frequency, and it needs to be transmuted into a form that is resemblant of a Satan, a demon, a whatever, and that's their transmutation. And so it's completely perfect. It's okay. It's just how they're perceiving things. And as they continue to evolve and raise that up and they move through duality, that type of frequency doesn't hold water. It doesn't hold long enough. It can't sustain that line. And so, I've never ever once come across that type of energy that can't be negotiated. The longest negotiation I ever had with something like that was about 3 hours. But mostly these guys are literally being given their marching orders and their papers inside of like a minute or two. And you know how you intercept and dissolve this? Do you need a hug? And like the second you connect that and you're able to transmit that frequency of unconditional love and acceptance, it dissolves. It's like people are like, whoa, what
Well,
happened?
yes. And this is what I say is that we are powerhouses of energy. So we can imagine, okay, so our human eyes can only perceive, between 5 to 6% of the entire energy spectrum. Barely. That's a sliver. That's 5 to 6% of the entire. So there's another 94% that's out there. So we can imagine, butterflies seeing in ultraviolet, other species that are capable of seeing in infrared. They're capable of perceiving other perceptual states of our energy. Just because we can't see it with our physical eyes doesn't mean that it does not exist. That
Right.
is what for that perceptual states are, right? So the higher sensory perception.
Amen. And well, that's exactly what I was going to get to. And I was going, spoiler alert, Maria's going to tell them that she's going to reveal it to the world that that's a sensory perception that you have it from here. It activates through here. And it's realized that all these senses that we speak of, that other beings, other sentient beings throughout this universe have the ability to access, that's including us. So that means that all those senses are available to you if you start with a seed of imagination. That's what I say.
The seed, so imagination. So that if we think about it, our ability to access the unseen has been robbed from us. Not only by, turning off a lot of our capability and the use of our brain, numbing and dumbing us down, and then also keeping all of our genetics dormant, okay? All of those abilities that we were naturally born with. So that is evidenced by the capping of our telomeres, so we, in our own energy, in our own DNA, there's literally caps that were put on and that they would digress to actually limit us because we were becoming so powerful. What we carry inside is so extreme. We carry like a nuclear powerhouse within ourselves that is able to emote. And what I've been shown is that with one, fit of rage, we can completely obliterate life forms. But with that same energy, the amount of life force energy that we are capable of accessing and tapping into, there is so much that is available. And yes, we must be, understand that we are an individuated stream of consciousness meant to be all part of the whole, that we are, a tapestry, of all of these threads, that if one was to be pulled, the entire thing would disassemble, that is how powerful that we all are, that we have this ability to tap into that because that is what we are. So we have this, it is our ability and our responsibility to understand that within ourselves. So becoming self-aware, being able to understand why we're here, remembering our soul's purpose, that we are here to be so much more than just our settling and our sacrificing, that there's so much that we are capable of, where there is this invisible field of energy that we are immersed in that is just as dense as water. Our element happens to be air. But that no one can argue that if I was to have a radio right here and I turned it on and it had the capability, it could pick up, a multitude of signals. And I had the ability of reading for an individual who's working within radio waves, and was saying that they had to invent new microwaves because there's no more room. If you can imagine, I myself have 2 cellular phones, and every single other person out there with all of the signals, the frequencies. We are attuning to frequencies. We are the instrument. We have the ability to tune in and tap into. And if we don't like the radio station that we're listening to, we have the ability to change that station. But it's up to us to be able to even be aware that it's there. What frequency am I tapping into? These entities that do exist, they are utilizing us to feed off of all these parasitic energies, not just other people. People are being used to instigate and agitate each other because all of these parasitic energies that are just living off of this, it's like they terraform the planet, and that the gold that they're looking for isn't necessarily the element and the mineral of gold. They're looking for the gold that we carry, the energy that they can tap into. It is like the darkest, like polluted, but they thrive in that field. And so we are here. What are we talking about? This golden age. We're talking about this new era where there's cooperation, collaboration, where there's a sense of unity. We uplift one another. There's no more duality. So these are 2 completely opposite frequencies. So the world of polarity, duality, opposition is an entirely different frequency than this unity, wholeness, togetherness. And so we're here to bypass and learn that we have to work with ourselves. I have to raise my own energy. I have to work with my thoughts. I have to work with my emotions. I have to make those tough decisions to stop doing things that don't feel good, to have the courage to do the things that do feel good, to have a better understanding of I'm involved in a world that is not separate from me, that I can tap into this and it is there for me to experience, that this reality that I'm experiencing is being created through my own thoughts, through my own emotions. And the more of us that can activate, tap into that, see a world that is not what it is right now, and we don't help it by fighting against it, because then we're just contributors to it. We have to be able to have the courage to see something entirely different and have a willingness to not engage in things. So people would say, well, if you're not upset about this, then you're not doing anything about it. Well, no, they're hooking us and they're keeping us trapped in that state. So instead, maybe see like, well, if I don't like this, what can be different? And do I have the courage to do things differently so that I can create something entirely different? And it requires so much dedication within ourselves to gravitate towards that, to work with ourselves. So changing our frequency, and we are the most sophisticated instrumentation that there is. Everything about our body and our brain is to perceive information, to help us engage in our world and create something different. So again, that extra sensory perception, there's so much more available. And if people would understand that emotions are messages of their soul, sensations and physical things are also communication from our inner soul. We have been so disconnected from our own inner self that we don't even know how to engage in our world anymore. But that's also by design, because the more we're dumbed down and subdued, then we have less energy to actually access our own power to create something different. So the more of us that are able to connect, able to understand, tap into something, we are so extraordinary. We are powerful beyond measure. So those that are watching, I want to say, like, you are powerful beyond measure. And may we all band together to create this most incredible, beautiful world that we're here to create.
So profound, my friend. You speak of the emotion as an expression within Taoism. We kind of like we use this model of understanding. It's called Wu Wei, which means effortless action, effortless effort. And that is like the definition within Taoism. We say we're being done by the Tao. It means completely immersed as one, past the duality aspect. I tend to find through my own exploration and teaching people internal alchemy practices to cultivate this palpable energy we speak of, is the emotion is a distraction for the human experience. So the emotion in of itself is a distraction. When you understand that your emotions don't control you, you control your emotions, all of a sudden you can experience that. I never ever recommend anyone to go down the path of, I was told by my local pastor or my spiritual guide that I need to have a death of my ego. That's a mistake. That's a fallacy. That's a misunderstanding. This personality that you have been given through this human experience is that. And when you understand to master the ability to go, okay, personality, Sun Ching over here, now you're going to express yourself in a higher consciousness and be able to alter that. Because when you're dealing with magic, manifestation, and healing, there is a state of consciousness that is not where, how do I put it? If you want to affect change in this 3D reality from a higher ascension, you have to be able to access that at a rate that is accessible as we're moving beyond light speed. The understanding of that, which then encapsulates more a new language that people want to coin as quantum physics or physics in of itself, explaining sort of the synchronicities of how we're obtaining this realization. Furthermore, speaking of the capping of the telomeres within the DNA strand, this again, I always remind people, if you come from biology, psychology, neurology, and physiology, you are limited. The stuff that Maria and I are talking about dispels and disbands the construct of physicality. This is just a starting point. So what does that mean? And people, I always talk in the third person. Shifu, what does that mean? And I go, well, basically it means that you're able to access a state of consciousness and have the ability to move past what, we've defined as, the inner workings of the mechanics of a human in the DNA strand. Understanding, people, all the OGs, when a lot of the stuff you were saying today, the OGs are like, oh my goodness, she must be hanging out with Shifu all the time. No, because this is a message of understanding, this in-depth realization that you're getting from your consciousness is the message that's coming through, just as the message that's coming through from myself and my own journey. And it's like, it's so similar. It's like it's freaky. And it's like, there is no right or wrong way, but that understanding and that capturing of, this present moment, which is really the moment for all things that are realized. Does this make sense?
It does. The only moment that we have is now. And I know that people when I used to hear that, I'd be like, what does that mean? So when I came back after my NDE, it took a while to actually implement, understand, seek, learn, apply. So it wasn't like, everything's good and perfect. It was this huge process of delving into it, choosing it consciously and working with it. And to be able to come to these understandings, absolutely. That we are so incredibly powerful. We are all part of this unified whole. And that when we are able to understand that everything begins to shift and change, and that we come into this knowledge and this awareness in the place that we are, so we come to it, and some things that we speak of may make no sense right now. But as we dig deeper, explore ourselves, come into the awareness, have certain experiences, have an openness and a willingness to explore new things, that these are all languages, that science is not in opposition of religion, and that other religions are not in opposition of each other, although some, their beliefs and how they carry them forth. Yes.
My football team is better than yours. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. So it's where hopefully we're all arriving to the same place. And that's the whole point, is that when we understand and So when we talk about this golden age and this transition that's happening on the planet at this time, that's what we're trying to do, is alleviate ourselves from this darker, heavier, denser energy where we see everything in opposition and competition, to
Mm.
where we see now that there is plenty manifesting miracles, absolutely, and being able to be in that place of such sacredness, and knowing that we're in pure creation. That if we think about it, that what we're physically capable of seeing with our physical eyes, that it's going through a process. It's not even our eyes that are seeing anyway. That our visual cortex is in the very back of our head, in the base of, our skull. Our our eyes perceive the light. Well, and it crisscrosses within our brain. It's going through a process of filtration. It's actually interpreting what we are seeing, and so we can open up and expand ourselves into, maybe what I'm seeing is not the whole picture. And gosh, I only see 6% of the energy spectrum. Like, oh, well, maybe that in and of itself can open up, and the awareness of, maybe I can begin to perceive something different. Maybe I can begin to shift and open. Maybe I can understand that, these aren't competing things, and that every single one of us is a divine, unique, individuated, spark of divinity. That's the only difference. What we have at our core is all the same, and superimposed on that is personality. That's it.
And that, amen to that. Again,
Mhm.
I want to like take a closer look at when you reference this golden age of an awakening, and you and I are resonating the same frequency, and that's why we bonded immediately, and it was just effortless, which comes back to Wu Wei, effortless action within Taoism. And
Mm.
so this sort of theme, especially in the spirituality community, is really more surface, not really depth of and it's an expression that is manipulated, in my opinion. I'm seeing this, and say, for example, like the reason I got into social media in the last, like, I've only been at it about 5 or 6, maybe 7 months, and so I look at it and I go, wow, okay, this, I thought there were egos in the health and fitness industry, and this is like a whole different kettle of fish, where people are saying one thing and they're really not, they're not transmitting at the frequency. I want the audience to understand what Maria and I are embodying and transmitting is not the general theme of most of these situations. Like when you get on these podcasts and you get all these people that are like, oh, I want to hear your story, and it turns into a business of clicks, and that, quite frankly, I'm really gathering a community of channelers that can actually express this, and it's not conceptual by someone else exploiting our experiences and our abilities, our masteries, to utilize their own stream of like financial gain. This is sort of something that I've noticed a lot of, and that's where I want to bring a community together of these like-minded, incredible beings like yourself, and it's happening really dramatically. Like I've gathered probably a dozen or 2 dozen channelers at this point in the last couple of weeks that can, I know, because I've been doing this 30 years, they really do it. This is not like a figment of their imagination where they read a book and then they recite it. And so every time you get to a podcast, it's this person reciting the story that they created, and it's like it's nothing more than conceptual after that. It was a glimpse, a moment. It's not realized in their reality. And there's nothing, I want people to understand, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like you can access that at will. I had a guy on earlier today who was very big on psychedelics, and I'm like, that's great. This is an entry point for how you are able to access consciousness. But I've been teaching people to access their own DMT production for the last 30 years. So a 20-minute experience you might get from an external substance, you can replicate for hours on end inside yourself. And so these sort of abilities are, again, we return back to this present moment. And it's like, how do you validate that, right? So it's like, we need this to be validated by the individual. And I always return to
your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with. And people are like, whoa, that's kind of scary. Are you empowering someone to that they get to validate what their truth is? Yes. And
Yes.
so, yes, it's like, and so for the audience, I want them to understand Maria's truth, my truth, is our truth. You could resonate with our message and understanding, but until you're able to experience what we speak of, it's nothing more than conceptual. And I don't want you to take that as being the only framework of your reality. I want you to experience your own reality and your own perception and your own creation of what will be your consciousness. And if that happens, that it's on a similar frequency as Maria and myself, then that's even more powerful. But realize that you will sink into your own frequency, you'll sink into your own consciousness, and then that will be realized for you. And we're just sharing and teaching you things to give you the ability to access it. And what I like is to be able to repeat it. I'm a show me guy. That means it's like, I'm going to show you. You want a healing? You want a physical healing? You want to see it transform flesh before your very eyes? I've seen it thousands of times in my lifetime. And so I'll show you. And it's like, and people are like, what are you talking about, Shifu? I'm like, well, it's quite simple. If you understand what it's like to hit that frequency in a 3D reality, there's a general consensus and understanding how that transmutes. And it looks very much like a wiggling effect that takes place within the flesh. And you will see it wiggle and transmute before your eyes as if it's like a cartoon. And it's so head trippy and so wild to watch, because you will see something like, for example, I just used this because it happened yesterday as a quick go-to. My two kids are running after each other. One of them trips and they face first into the dirt. They get up, they've got a fat lip the size of a watermelon, and it's like, boom. What happens there? How do you access that consciousness? Okay, it's quite simple. Once you hit that frequency, guess what happens? You'll watch it transform, and it will melt like ice cream before your very eyes, and it will go back to its original default state. And normally in a situation like that, I've seen that affect everything from tumors, cancerous tumors, to something as simple as a sprained neck, to nerve damage, to migraines, to gangrenous flesh that turns back to its original state of fleshy pink color. I've seen it all. It's not, all this stuff is completely tangible and real. And when you sink into that frequency, and you get a collective, like I love doing group healings, you get 1,000 people in a room and you connect them all together, and their sole purpose is to heal themselves mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. They're walking out of there with a healing. And it's a collective thing. It's an absolute fundamental mind blower for people, because they're like, I did nothing, but I just sat in on what I perceived as just a meeting of the minds. Well, it literally was a meeting of the minds, and you are accessing a frequency, a default of your perfection manifest that then is generated in a 3D reality. But you have to validate it for yourself. Like, manifestation is the same. It happens instantaneous. It doesn't happen. Why don't you frame it it'll happen in the next 72 hours. It'll happen in 30 days. Absolutely. If that's your framing of how you want it to happen, then that's going to happen. If you want it to operate in the reality of the light, beyond light speed that we're really operating in, then it's going to happen right now. And so it's just how I've entered into this. But even back in the day when I first started over 30 years ago, I discovered distance healing as one of the training practices that I was given, right? And so the story is quite simple. I get the first time I ever did it, it was a day of training, and it's just a list of, you need to do this, and then it will be generated. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we go through the training, we do the list. Anyway, the day ends. I get a phone call from a friend, rotary phone in those days, not the old self. My kids would be like, what is that? What is that, Dad? What does that mean? Get the phone call. My friend is like, I can't meet you. I sprained my ankle. Okay. Well, let's catch up next week. And before she left off the phone, I said, whoa, hang on. And I'm like, huh, I got the list here. Let's check this out. And this was a mind blower to me because I attribute this to the realization that I accept things at face value. And it's very much like going back to childlike state. When you're not conceptualizing anything and you truly just go, it says here that if I do this, this is going to happen. Well, yeah, it's going to happen. And so I basically followed the instruction. And then my incantation was this simple: heal, 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 heal. Mm-hmm. And the phone call on the other end of the phone was, what? And she was like screaming. And she said, what the hell is going on? I'm like, what? My ankle just shrunk before my very eyes, and I'm standing on it right now. And I'm like, you're full of it. You're sorry. You're full of that. No. Because that was my entry into this realization. And that's a daily practice for me. That's what I witness day in and day out. And then that moved into, doing a healing on her mother who had, and when I say do a healing, I witnessed something. I'm not even getting into the whiz. It's not about an ego thing. I'm well past that. I'm not, the first time you discover this magic, what I would define, or most people, as a miracle, you do have that moment, like, and it's just the humanness. It's like, well, I don't want anyone else to know that I'm the next coming of Jesus. I cannot tell anyone this. And you get it. You become protective for a second. And in that same second, only a few moments after, my teacher, Latsu, was like, your gift is your offering. And I'm like, but what value will I have if I teach all these people how to do this? Your gift is your offering. And I'm like, that means the present. You're present. It's the present now. That is your gift. That is your offering. And in return, you receive it. It's almost like an infinity. Mm-hmm. Where did this come from? And so you have this moment, and it is part of the human experience as you start to realize that was a programming that was controlling your very perception. And then you realize it and you go, wow. The more you teach people this stuff, the more you expose people to the true inner power, the more the raising of the consciousness, as Maria and I have spoken about today, it just becomes more apparent. And then the golden age that Maria's been talking about today, it starts to ripple through and resonate through everything, which is really the turning point. I don't know, a lot of people are sort of bracing themselves. I'm not sure what your guides are telling you about this year, but I've heard of many stories. I always like listen to everyone's understanding. Then I go to Latsu. Latsu gives me his interpretation, and it's really quite simple. And one thing that kind of blew my mind was he was like, listen, you got to understand, if you're worrying about what's happening with human beings in 2024, you're still in the psyop. And so hang on. Well, and what does that mean? It's like you are still compartmentalized. So, and he explains it's just as simple. It's like you are basically a grain of sand asking the beach, what are you doing today? And it's like, whoa, I went, that is mind-blowing. But in reality, that's the truth. I mean, the universe is not like taking a closer look at the plight of the human being and wondering whether they're going to be, either here nor there. They're an expression of consciousness. This is a cycle of things. If you observed nature in of itself, blades of grass, a tree, Bambi, it doesn't matter. They're not concerned with the past or the future. They're just right now. And so all this sort of realization, and like you have this inner like understanding of the true nature of things, that we have our epiphanies, like Maria and myself, and you get to this point, and it's like the more people we share this with, the more the raising of the consciousness, as Maria has put it so clearly, the golden age that Maria has spoken on, and that realization, that rippling effect where the frequencies that we speak on that may be trapped within a duality experience start to dissipate. And it's not for a good nor bad sort of experience. It's just a realization that, I'm sorry, you want to wake up and every moment is perfection manifested. I wouldn't know a single person that wouldn't want to experience that, and in of itself. Now, a lot of people talk about the human experience as being a journey of pain and suffering. And again, I would quote the realization that this is your perception. This is your experience. This is your reality. This is how you got it. And there is nothing wrong with that. You know, I interviewed a guy just the other day, and he said, my guides told me I've come to Earth to experience being a human. I'm like, awesome. Awesome. Now, if you want to if you ever want to, you know, move those emotions to the side and tell them to sit and roll over in the corner of the room, and you want to master that, please come and see me. I'll be more than happy to show you how to do that. That is just a switch in. All it is, switch in. It's like, you want to experience the humanness. You want to experience these things. When you come to a realization you are an eternal immortal having a human being experience, all of a sudden, oh, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to express this incredible gift that is this? And it was so beautiful. You were speaking on this. This is, I always I've coined this for years, and any OGs in the channel will hear this. This is your tuning fork for the barometer of your reality. And so that feeling registers whether it's real or not to you. And so for the audience, a feeling and an emotion are two different things. People need to get that really straight and not be twisted on that. All things that create your reality, everything I've taught people is a thought, feeling, and an emotion. That's it. You're talking about. That's it. That's the beginning and end of all things. How you turn that to a vibration, and then that vibration turns into a frequency, and that frequency is then generated into, this is light to wave to particle to matter, particle and matter, two are the same, however you want to flip the omelet, whatever you want to call it. All this becomes realized with your attention intention, as you are not the body, as we remind ourselves within Taoism. When you believe you are not of this body, what could harm you? Nothing. And so the fear, let's get the fear out of the way. All right, enough of the fear. Let's get down with it. Let's embrace this whole experience. And then you have this incredible epiphany where your life is just one incredible example of this expansion upon expansion upon expansion upon expansion.
And that's what I mean, is that when we have that God spark inside, where do we gravitate towards? Where does our attention go? And what do we intend? So we are a powerhouse of energy, and that we really do, like, you hold us, I call it the undilute absolute, that it is a micro piece that it holds. And it's not just a thing that we are holding. It's not a thing. It's an access. It's an entry point. It's a portal. It's a portal into your inner being and your inner world, where everything actually exists. What we perceive outside of us is just an ability to have reference point. But we are beings that have the ability to harness that energy within. When we go inside, that is that portal. So we are the entry point. So, bringing it back full circle is that at the very beginning, the understanding is that I didn't travel through a tunnel. And what I've come to understand is that that pinpoint of light was literally my own portal. What we're traversing through is our own access into that we are a pinpoint of it, and we are all intraconnected. That is our entry point. When we can understand that we have that inside, that's what we're trying to get to. And that all of this is interconnected. We're infused, we're spread upon the planet, but we are not separate. That when we literally heal this planet one soul at a time. So may each of us, really tap into that understanding of, our ability to access is through our imagination. It is through our thoughts. If we can see it and then begin to evoke the feeling of already having it, and then the emotions informing us, this world would be entirely different. That's what we came here to do. And so I've enjoyed our conversation so much. Like, I've really, really, truly enjoyed it. So I'm sure we can continue going on. And I barely even scratch the surface of this.
Yes.
So much more, I know.
And I'm look, I'm very mindful of your time, and I'm very grateful. And I know the audience is very grateful you sharing your time with us today and sharing your mastery and your consciousness
with us. In closing, just before you leave, and I just want to let the audience know we're going to revisit this. We're going to have Maria back because we just got started. I'm, we're experiencing this incredible oscillation. It's wild.
It amplifies, so when two or more, that's when they say when two or more are gathered, is that it amplifies so that we have this resonance. We're in tune, and then like tuning forks, they amplify. And it's so the more of us that are connected in this, yes, it amplifies, and then we can ripple that out through the world. So I am all for it. I would love to reconnect and continue conversation because I know that we've barely scratched the surface.
We barely scratched it.
Barely.
In closing, Maria, I'll ask you one question. What's your definition of consciousness?
Oof. The definition of consciousness is our awareness, is the ability to be self-aware in an individuated experience, which is having a moment in eternity. So consciousness is our ability to have focused awareness in eternity. But we are all infused, and it is divine and part of something incredible.
Woo, woo. And I'm going to put all your social under this podcast, but I also want you to share with the audience what's going on with Maria right now.
Okay. Oh, I am so excited for all of this newness to come because I am about to embark in. I've had the beauty and the privilege of working with such incredible souls all over the planet. Without even wanting or desiring this, again, it kind of happened on its own that the whole of the universe had a different plan for me. So I am a soul reader, tapping into Akashic records, mediumship, all of this ability, but really it's to meet the soul. And there's nothing that gives me greater pleasure than to be able to see someone ignite their own light so that we could be that brightness together. And so it is a passion of mine to teach people how to tune into their own intuition, how to understand that it's the language of their own soul. And so I'm about to embark on so many other opportunities of being able to help many, many different people. So, and I'm actually in the process of writing my first manuscript. And so, yes, I have a book forthcoming. So I'm really excited about this. So lots to come.
I'm very excited. I can't
you.
wait. I can't wait. Well, in closing, I want to thank you, my friend, first of all, I want to thank the universe of the Tao for bringing you into my frequency, and we are just like resonating and, creating a new friendship. It's really profound. And I want to thank you for sharing everything with us today and your insight, your mastery of this level of awareness, this consciousness that we speak of. And then I want the audience to go out and take a look at all of Maria's offerings, and whatever is necessary that they resonate with. I want them to embrace what it is that you're sharing, which is really exciting, because that's really what consciousness is really expansion. So in closing, thank you, Maria. I'm very grateful that you spent your time with us today. And I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master Sun Ching, and I will see you on the next one, guys.